Now back to Just Energy Radio with Dr. Rita Louise.
I click the button, I get off of mute, I think I'm just blabbing away, blah, 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 do this great introduction, and then no answer, and I'm muted. Okay, so we're going to just start over. So in the second hour, we're going to be talking about surviving loss, help for healing grief. And to do that, we're going to be talking with Tina Erwin. And let me just tell you a little bit about Tina, because I did this whole long, great introduction that none of you heard. But you're going to hear it now. Tina Erwin has studied metaphysics all her life to enable her to understand her own psychic abilities. These intense studies were further enhanced by the experiences of a dynamic 20-year career in the Navy, working for the U.S. submarine forces, retiring at the commander level. All these experiences enabled her to not only assist her sister and her family at the death of their child. Erwin offers us all hope about the afterlife while also exploring reincarnation, death's gate, angels, and ghosts as she takes us through the stages of grief, offering us tools and methods that really help us heal. So please welcome to Just Energy Radio, Tina Erwin. Hi, Tina.
Hi. Thank you for having me.
Thanks. You just got to love radio sometimes, especially live radio. If you heard my original introduction, you would have been like, woohoo, woohoo. I'm stoked because it was really good.
I did not hear it. I'm so sorry.
Well, no one heard it. That's the problem. No one heard it. The best ones I do, I am on mute. I do not understand that. I'm just talking to the ghosties, I guess. So, Tina, anyway, let's start here. I mean, I'm sure everybody knows what the word grief is in a generic sense, but I don't think they really understand what the experience of grief is. And so could you kind of talk about what grief is and how we experience grief in our lives?
Yes, I'd be happy to. Everyone experiences grief a little differently because each experience is unique to that person. In a general sense, when something we love is taken from us, then we grieve the loss. We miss it. It can be your child going to first grade. They're not home all day with you anymore. You're getting a divorce, and the life you thought you were going to have, you're not going to have. You see your house in flames, and all the plans you had for the house aren't there. Or your child dies, or your husband dies, or your mother dies. And the momentum of living day to day with what you thought was going to happen comes to an abrupt halt. And you have to change how you live, how you think of yourself, and you have to grieve it. You have to move through the stages of letting go of what you had and embracing what you still have. Does that help?
That totally helps. I mean, because like I said, it's like I think people, they know the word, but not how it fits into the context of our lives. So it sounds like, and I think everyone is aware that we can have grief when we lose someone, as in a physical death, but I don't think people realize that we can experience grief, as you were saying, if your house burns down, if you are divorced, but those are also huge losses in our lives.
Exactly, because every experience is going to change each of us in some way. And so how we choose to embrace the experience of some type of loss, you could lose your earring and you're really frustrated for days, or your car is in an accident and you love that car. If you allow yourself the process of grieving it, instead of saying, oh, I should just get over this, you can't just get over something. That's almost an uncomfortable word. If your pet dies, you had a relationship with that animal, and you honor the animal, you honor a situation or the home or the car or the person who died by allowing yourself time to process the feelings that go with the separation, the loss, and now you have a new life without whatever that was.
And I think there are a lot of people that try to or choose not to experience grief, or choose as best they can to not experience grief, and take those kind of situations, okay, maybe not the earring, but some of the bigger ones, and just toss them over their shoulder. It's like, I'm strong, nothing's going to get me down, I can just work my way right through this.
That's exactly what happens, and especially when there's a physical death. I'll start with an animal. If you have a beloved pet that has loved you unconditionally, they love you when you don't do hair and makeup and when you don't shave and you have bad breath, that animal's still going to love you. That total loyalty is so precious. And when the animal dies, I can't tell you how many people say, I shouldn't be so upset about this. Of course you should be. Love is precious. And when the object of your affection and the issuer of that affection isn't there anymore, you're going to miss it. And it actually honors the animal when you can allow that grief to take place. People expect that you're going to grieve if your child dies, or your husband's killed in a plane crash, or your wife's in a terrible automobile accident. That is expected grief. But even then, we don't allow people time to process it. They want you to come, your boss, your friends want you to go back to being the person you were. But frequently the person you were died with them that day, and you've become a new person. And you have to get to know yourself before you can begin to relate to other people in any kind of a new way, or go back to the old situation, because you aren't the same. You have changed. And you kind of have to get to know yourself a little bit more now.
Well, and I totally hear about the pet. I had a dog who died, and she was my girl. I mean, she was my girl. I mean, even just talking about it, I mean, this is like 7 years ago. And when she passed, some of my friends were like, it's been like a year. It's like, so, it's been 7 years, and I still miss her, and I still grieve about her. Maybe you can help me heal through that. But a lot of people don't. You're right. They don't want to give you that time that you need, or think, well, it was just a dog, or it was just your car, or it was just this thing, outside of a human being, and you should just be able to get over it quick. Boop, boop, boop. It's been 3 days. Come on, tick, tick, tick. I guess what you're saying is that that's not realistic, or maybe not healthy.
It isn't healthy, and I think that perhaps if whether it's you or, I have always had Siamese cats, and they're, an incredible personality, and I have been married to a man who's still going to sea after 36 years, and that Siamese was always there for me. And when he died, I felt it was his time to go, and I understood that. The cat was 17 and frail, and yet I still love him. I still think he's a wonderful creature. And so if somebody says, well, are you still grieving him? I'm at a point now, it's been many, many years, I'm not grieving in an active sense, but when I think of him, my heart skips a little, because he was really precious. And that memory of the love is what you take with you forever, and you don't ever get over that. It's sort of like the finest wine or the most precious painting. It simply grows finer with age. The longer you have the memory, the more precious it becomes. So you don't get over a memory. You simply love it and enhance it.
Well, then let me ask you this question, because I have this question of myself, and I'm sure the listeners probably have the same question. So when you have that memory and you experience the sadness, you're not saying that that's grief. That's just the memory of the relationship that you're experiencing again.
Yes. And when you can experience the memory with your heart filling up with love, then you are healing your grief at varying levels. Grief takes as long as it takes to heal. There is no timetable. Every person is unique. You can't rush it. And if it's a human being who has died, the method of the person's death, your relationship with the person, and the role that person had in your life are all going to determine how you grieve. If you had a beloved grandmother and she died in her sleep at 100 years old, there's an expectation that, okay, she lived, there's no further expectation. She lived a long life. She was greatly loved, and I miss her, and yet I feel she had a long life, and my love for her and my missing her are all part of a normal process. If a person's child dies at birth or at 6, or a twin dies, and after only a few weeks, that's a whole different ballgame, because depending on, again, how that child died, is an accident, or let's say a child was murdered. I've spoken to many parents of murdered children, and that method of death is going to color how that person grieves. And if you have to help someone who's grieving that, it's going to require a great deal of patience, a great deal of compassion and kindness, and a sense that there is no time for how long they're going to grieve. They have to process it in their own method, in their own time.
Well, and I'm going to kind of throw out the converse. I do like spiritual counseling. I'm a medical intuitive, and I do counseling with my clients, and I have had multiple clients who have elderly parents. They have long-term health issues. They have worked as a caretaker for many, many years, and the parent finally does transition, and they have this terrible sense of guilt because they're not grieving. Is that normal?
Actually, that is very normal, because we are connected to something called Akka cords, which I talk about in my book. And these Akka cords connect us to every person we've ever met, every place we've ever been, and everything we've ever touched. And that's why we're all connected, or we talk about apron strings. We're really connected to each other. But when a person is going through a process of dying, and we know it, unconsciously or subconsciously, we start to cut those cords. Slowly but surely, we cut those cords. We're pre-grieving that person's passing, so that when they are finally died, we don't have the same level of grief as if it was a sudden, unexpected death of a younger person. And it's a perfectly normal, and it's actually quite healthy, because you have no further expectation for that individual. You don't want to see them in any more pain. And over the days and weeks of their passing, you have said your goodbye in your own way, and you got to say everything you wanted to say to them if you took that opportunity. So in that scenario, after they've died, you don't feel a tremendous amount of grief. It means that you've actually done far more grief processing than you were aware of.
But I think it's important for people that either are in that situation or close to that situation or have been in that situation to recognize that it's not a bad thing.
Exactly.
Because they tend to have this really guilty, well, they died, but I don't feel bad, and they don't, because they have worked through the energy. They've had years or months to kind of work through the energy of it, and they're okay with it.
That's exactly correct. Exactly. I had a client. I've worked with a lot of people privately, and a lady came to me, and her mom was dying of leukemia, and she said everyone walks around, they won't speak about it. And so I gave them all a list of tasks to do, and I said I'd like you to, in her hospital room, sit her down, and every one of you talk about, pick one thing, an experience you had that made you love her so much, and then talk about all the things that you'd ask her to forgive of you, and then you can forgive her a variety of things. And there must have been 25 people in this room, and they went around and they did this. It took them several days, and there was laughter and tears. And then when she finally passed away, several of them came back and said, you realize that we don't feel the same grief we would have had we not had the experience of getting to say goodbye, of being able to speak out loud of forgiveness and given and received, and tell her what we wanted to tell her. And they said that there were fewer tears, the funeral was almost a joyous event because everyone was at peace. If you're at peace with the person who has passed and your relationship to them, your grief is going to be significantly different and tremendously less.
Well, and I would think if, you have all these people, or even if it's just one or two, in a hospital room with the person who's ill, whether they're conscious or not, it also gives the person that is going to be in transition permission to let go. It gives them permission to forgive themselves, forgive other people, and I would think that in those situations, those people would actually transition easier.
That is exactly what happened, especially in this case. It also caused people to stop being afraid of a person who's dying and being afraid of death. They could see that they could help, that they didn't have to feel powerless. They felt empowered. And the lady who was dying felt that she could express these things and no one was afraid of her. And this event actually took place probably 2 to 3 weeks before she finally died. She was able to go home, and her 4 daughters were able to be with her. And she gave them all kinds of things because all of a sudden the fear, the stigma, tiptoeing around the subject, they came right out in the open and they talked about it. And it was as if this wonderful breath of fresh air blew through the room. They could talk about it, and no one was afraid. And as she physically died, there was no fear attendant with her death, and they sent her prayers. They sent her angels. They were empowered, and she was empowered. It was a very powerful, wonderful time.
Well, and I know in my experience observation, is that when the person is in transition, can let go and feel supported and to feel loved, it makes that process easier. It makes it so that they can just go into it peacefully and not be scared. I mean, usually what keeps a person tied to the body, regardless of what's going on with them physically, is that they're too scared to let go. They feel like they haven't made, said the things that they wanted to their children, to their brothers, sisters, or whatever, and so they're hanging on, and this gives them that permission to just surrender to the transition, which I think is beautiful, wonderful.
It is beautiful. It is the compassion we would each want for ourselves, is the feeling that our loved ones are going to be all right after we're not here. And in this particular example I've been using, they all said they would be all right, and they gave her permission to go. They thanked her for being a wonderful mom or friend or sibling or spouse, and she was able to return that. We don't always get such a remarkable opportunity, but this family did have that, and they said that from now on they would feel that they would be able to share that with another person who might be going through this. So as one person learns and they share that knowledge of embracing a normal process of life and death, they felt that they would be of greater service to someone else and that they would be able to help their own families when their time came.
But even just us having the conversation about this process, I think, might stir people. It might create a little memory in the back of their mind for the situation where they need to have that information. They can go, maybe we can do this, or it's not a bad thing. This will help. And I think just giving people the knowledge that this can help is helpful.
Yes, it is. Most people, when confronted with any type of a death scenario, feel completely powerless and helpless. And frankly, the purpose of my book is to empower anyone who happens to read it to be helpful to another person or to find help in it for themselves, so that they can find that light worker within each of us that wants to help another person. We're all going to experience some form of loss in our life. The question is, how will we choose to handle it? And if it happens to a friend or neighbor, what are the tools we're going to need to help that friend or neighbor through their crisis? So that was sort of the impetus in writing this, was to truly be of some service here.
Well, that's because you're a light worker, girl. That's what we do.
That's what we do.
That's what we do. And so we're talking about physical death. And so as we were kind of talking about a little bit earlier, there's also emotional deaths. There are these losses that create these profound changes. You know, it always makes me think of like the tarot card, you know, the death card, and, you know, people will get it in a reading and they freak out. It's like, oh my God, am I going to die? Ah! And, but I have to tell you, in one reading, it really did indicate that there was somebody in transition. One. In all the years I've been doing psychic readings, I mean, I don't use cards a lot, but I throw them in periodically if I'm at an event. And in one reading, the card actually did indicate somebody in transition. So for all of you listening, if you get a tarot reading and that death card comes up, it don't mean that someone's going to die. However, I would assume you would agree that there is some profound life transformation that's going to be happening.
Well, exactly, because something has to end for something new to begin. It isn't necessarily bad. It's simply a physics issue. So if example, let's say you're having a divorce, and let's say that your relationship with your spouse is not working for either of you, and without casting blame, you end it. And so for you to have a new relationship, the one you're currently in has to end. For you to learn what you need to learn, perhaps the relationship has to end. And for whatever those reasons are, once the relationship ends, and that momentum has to come to a halt, and it takes time for that momentum to come to a halt, then you can that's the grieving process. While you're waiting for your momentum to come to a halt, then you can look at, all right, what did I learn from this relationship? What can I take from this? How do I want to apply this if I want a new relationship? So the problem with divorce is it isn't in a death that you bury the person or you cremate them or something happens and they're not there anymore. But in a divorce, grieving is actually different and hard in its own way because you may still have to see that person. There may be children involved. There may be bickering and fighting. It doesn't just end. So divorce is its own exceedingly tough challenge sometimes just to grieve it.
You know, and I just am chuckling because, you know, there's that part of most people going through the divorce that are going, yeah, but I just want to kill him, you know. So maybe there is a death on the, you know, looming in the air. And so, and I guess I was going here because there really was a question. When we grieve and work through, I mean, we're going to be going to a break in a second. I want to talk about the stages of grief when we come back from the break. But when we go through a divorce or some kind of transition like that, do we grieve in the same way? Do we do a different kind of process? Does that make sense? I mean, because intellectually it feels very different, but emotionally, is it really different?
Your relationship ended. It's the death of a relationship. It's the death of the identity you had with the person you were married to. That's over. And if it's not something that can be resurrected for whatever that reason is, then you are having to identify what happened. And there may be blame that is cast. There may be if only or what if or enormous, enormous rage that comes with divorce. And then you look at your children, and if you have children, if you don't have children, it can be a little easier. If you have children, it's exceptionally more complicated because it doesn't end. That your contact with your ex-spouse is going to continue if that's your situation. And so you're grieving what you had in your marriage. Now you're grieving your children's reaction to the divorce and your friend's reaction and your family's reaction and your boss's reaction. You're grieving your own sometimes subtle depression at being divorced. And so you have a lot of work to go through after a divorce. That's why it can take years before someone can embrace a new relationship. They have to grieve the first one.
Well, and it really makes a difference if you're the dumper or the dumpee, because sometimes people are so extricated emotionally from the relationship that they can be like, bye-bye, see ya, and not experience any grief at all. And I will make the assumption that they have grieved earlier, and that caused them to make emotional separation or cut those cords, as you said before.
That's entirely possible. But for the person who receives a phone call from the airport that says, gee, I don't love you anymore.
Well, that would be the dumpy.
That would be the dumpy. And that person is going to go through a tremendous amount. And it's a long journey. It's a tremendously fabulous opportunity for growth, but there's a saying in the Navy, when you're up to your rear end in alligators, it's really hard to remember that your mission is to drain the swamp. And sometimes divorce feels like you have to drain the swamp. And you have to get to the other side of that, and it's tough.
Well, Tina, we need to take a quick break. I'm
Okay.
Dr. Rita Louise. We're talking to Tina Erwin about her book, The Lightworker's Guide to Healing Grief. Her webpage is www.lightworkersguide.com, and we will be back after these words from our sponsors.
Just Energy Radio with your host, Dr. Rita Louise, will return right after these messages. Hi, I'm James Altayanchik, the Black Knight of Talk Radio. Listen to Dr. Rita's Soul Healer Moment live each third Sunday night of the month on Feet to the Fire. www.feet2fire.com for more information.
You can get a copy of Dr. Rita's latest book, Avoiding the Cosmic 2x4, by visiting www.soulhealer.com. Get your copy today.
How would you like to live long and enjoy great health? How about creating solid bones and whiter teeth, strengthen your heart and eyes, and have radiant, youthful-looking skin? There is an ancient health and longevity secret that has been used for millennia in Egypt, India, and China that can help you achieve this. For the first time in the modern world, Pearlsium brings ancient wellness secrets to you. For more information about Pearlsium, visit www.ancientpearl.com. Are you sensitive to energy? Want to explore the world beyond the five senses? Looking for a new career as an alternative healthcare practitioner? Then the Institute of Applied Energetics, Medical Intuition, and Energy Medicine training programs may be right for you. Our comprehensive curriculum provides students with a deep understanding of how to detect, evaluate, and transform the subtle body, as well as techniques for correcting energetic imbalances that may underscore a person's ability to experience radiant health. So if you are sensitive to energy, contact the Institute of Applied Energetics right away. Be a catalyst for changing the way healthcare is done around the world. Visit www.appliedenergeticsinstitute.com and start your new career today.
And now back to Just Energy Radio with Dr. Rita Louise.
Hello and welcome back to Just Energy Radio. I'm Dr. Rita Louise, and we're here talking to Tina Erwin about grief. So, Tina, first let me ask you this question. So can grief be healed?
Yes, it can.
Okay. Because I guess in my mind, grief is something that you work through, but I guess as you're working through it, you're healing it.
Well, let's look at this from a physical viewpoint. If you break your arm and the bones knit back together, the body is always going to have the memory of the break. It's going to have maybe a weak area there. the arm may be returned to full usefulness, but the memory of that break is going to linger there. Are you healed, or are you still hurt? And I would propose that you are healed, but you carry the memory of it with you. And maybe you favor a little bit, or maybe some things cause it to be sore sometimes. So that is also true with grief. As each year goes by from the grief-causing event, parts of you heal a little bit more and a little bit more, and you can speak of it, and you're able to discuss it, and you gain greater wisdom, and you've sought the reason. All kinds of interesting events have happened. Maybe you are able to look at the larger picture of, this person's death caused me to learn this, or I met this person. Any number of things can happen. You're never going to lose the memory of the death. You're never going to forget the moment you found out, or you heard, or it happened. You're never going to forget how you felt, and you're never going to forget the love that you had. You're not ever going to forget that, nor should you. However, you are healing because you still have to do the mundane, the ordinary day-to-day, and you still have to be the same loving person you've always been, but you're different now, so you see yourself differently. So healing can be defined in a variety of ways.
And so when we are in grief or grieving, do we go through stages? And if we do, what are those stages, and how can we recognize them?
When you are grieving, you have the initial moment that you discover that this event has happened. I'll use myself because that's the easiest one for me to use. My sister calls and says, my 6-year-old daughter, Ariana, hasn't been breathing for the last 2 hours, which was pretty inconceivable to me. I couldn't wrap my brain around it, which is true for anyone who's received bizarre news. And as the time went on and we realized that they were not ever going to bring this child back, and she had in fact died, the disbelief turned to shock, which turned to complete numbness, and I had to get on an airplane and fly to Virginia Beach. And then there comes a point as you're going through this process, and it can happen, right away or a little while later, that you deny it. This cannot be. I just spoke to this child yesterday on the phone, and she was talking to me about her dollies. And you deny it. And then there's a part of you that becomes very angry. Why did this happen? I'm angry that she left, and I want to be angry at someone. There's got to be somebody to blame. This anger just becomes, depending on the situation, completely volcanic. It just can spew out, and it's incredible how angry you get, especially when you feel like there's no rhyme or reason to it. Then you have the next stage can be the stage of guilt and depression, the torture of what if and if only. Well, if only we had done this, or we had seen this, or noticed that, or paid attention to X, Y, or Z. If only we had said this wouldn't have happened. And after a while, you realize that you can do that forever. The what ifs and the if onlys become a torture, and if you stay in that place, it will literally poison you for the rest of your life. The next significant poison for you can be the jealousy, anxiety, and poor me stage that says, look at all those happy people. I'm the one who's suffering. But they're just going on with their happy lives. I'm never going to be the same again. And you can stay in that stage too, or you can realize that truly, and that is actually what happened with my sister and her family, is that we must have had 100 people walk through the door when this child died. And as we sat down and we listened to all these extremely kind people talk to us, every one of them had a story of someone that they had loved and lost, and we realized that we were not alone in our grief. Everyone is grieving something. And it caused our heart to swell in compassion for them. It was one of those very interesting moments when you, in your sadness, you look around and you see that someone else is sad too. We went into a restaurant where they had always gone and told the owner what had happened, and he said, well, my daughter died when she was 4. And so now you have, unfortunately, a shared experience, each person providing compassion to another. And that takes you out of the poor me scenario into a larger heart, a place of acceptance. And part of the acceptance is I'm not the only one. I'm not first person that's ever lost a child, and I won't be the last one, but I can maybe help someone else. And after a while, you live with that concept of acceptance, and everybody's process is unique. And you get to a place where whatever happened, perhaps you can forgive it. Maybe you can forgive the person who died. Maybe that person committed suicide, and your stages of grieving can be extremely intense with that. But eventually you can come to a place, if you choose to forgive them, to have compassion for whatever caused that person to leave or to die. And then you can choose to heal. You must choose this. No one can do this for you. And when you make that choice, you help everyone around you to heal, because you don't suffer in a vacuum. Everyone suffers with you, and everyone can heal with you too.
So, and I think I heard what you were saying, that people can really get stuck in the anger and why me phase, and that can go on for, so as opposed to fully healing it, they just get stuck in that process.
Yes. Because when you are grieving something, especially a divorce or an extremely tragic death, you have what I call a shadow self, and that self is grief. It's as if you have a companion, and it just doesn't leave you. You can't shake it off. You wake up with it. You go to sleep with it. You eat breakfast with it. It never leaves you. And it doesn't leave you until you come face to face with yourself, that you have changed, and begin to do some of the spiritual work, whatever your belief system is, whether you go to a church or you don't go to a church. At some point you have to come face to face with that person in the mirror and decide that you are going to heal, and you're going to keep loving those around you. Love heals you. Shutting yourself off from love doesn't. It just makes you sick.
And so I guess if you don't move through that phase, but I guess, in thinking about it for a second, I guess we've all have met people, if not ourselves, that, you ask them about something and, they start talking about their ex, or and it's like they're throwing daggers when they're on that topic.
Exactly, because they're still living the drama. When you don't need the drama anymore, then the anger can dissipate and it stops poisoning you. And no one can make that choice or that decision but the individual. And they have to love themselves enough to say that that person may want to continue the drama, but I don't. Or if you're the person who keeps feeding that drama, you must make a choice that that's not going to be who you are anymore. And it is not, I will not say it's easy. I will say that it is challenging. It takes courage. Courage is a tremendous freedom, but you have to earn it. Courage isn't action when it's easy. Courage is action when it's exceedingly hard. That's what true courage is. That's why we admire it so much.
So, do you have any guidance to someone that might be trapped? Because it sounds like, okay, you talk about grief and you talk about the different stages, and I guess most people are led to the assumption that you just automatically go through them, and on the back end, you're healed. Boom. It might take some time, but that there's this automatic thing that just propels you forward. And I think you're the first person I've ever heard comment that people can get stuck in the anger and the poor me part. And so do you have any tools, guidance, ideas, anything that, if someone listening is stuck in that place, that they can use to help them move out of it?
I would offer several things, but one of the first ones is I would offer the person who is stuck in that anger and that pain to look at all the people around you. Everyone really is grieving something. Maybe they lost their job. It used to be that, and hopefully it isn't, the statistic isn't true, that when military men left their military jobs, they only lived 5 years. They grieved it so much, they lost their identity. They couldn't leave that. And so they died. I made sure that didn't happen to my husband, but, it happens to other people. A person who is angry because their child was murdered or their husband committed suicide or their ex put them through a horrible divorce, the first opportunity they have is to look at what did you learn from this. We don't have experiences in our life to punish us. We have experiences so that we can learn from them. And if you could make a list of the lessons you learned, for instance, what I used to do with my own clients was I would ask them to give me an event and then an attendant emotion. And then we would go through a series of working out, what did you learn? What was the lesson of this? And as they began to do that, what's the event? What's the emotion? What did you learn? If your parent dies and you're 15, you have a sense of abandonment. If your husband dies and leaves you with small children, you have a sense of abandonment and rage. If your loved one commits suicide, you feel betrayed. They didn't tell you so you could have helped them. So you have gotten these different emotions, and you're learning that maybe that person didn't do this to betray you or to hurt you. That's simply what was going on inside of them. And if you can bring yourself to a point where you can have compassion for the person who died, it enables you to get out of the way and not look at yourself so much, but look at them. Maybe their time here was over and they left. Maybe the divorce is for your greater good, but you can't see it because you're so stuck in the drama. Maybe this person's suicide happened because what was eating them inside was so tremendous they sought an escape. Opening your heart to compassion, learning the lessons, is a really tremendous first step in that healing process.
Well, and I think opening yourself up to what the lesson is, especially in a divorce situation, gives you the opportunity to look at yourself and what you brought to the table, because it's never just about them. And you can learn so much about yourself. Sometimes it's kind of ugly. Sometimes it's not so ugly. And to me, in the case of a suicide, it usually doesn't have anything to do with you at all.
Exactly. That's exactly right. Sometimes a suicide has a secret self, and they don't want you to know that secret self exists. And they can feel so tortured that if instead of being angry at them or ashamed that your loved one committed suicide, throw all that out the window and look at the fact that that person must have been in such tremendous pain. Maybe if you extend your heart to them and send them a prayer of forgiveness, if that lives within you. You can't just legislate forgiveness. It has to live within you. Maybe you can help the person on the other side. And as you send out positive thought, you can help yourself.
Go ahead.
I have one more thought, and that is based on the work that I do and that you do. When you're grieving, sometimes you have to get help. You have to talk to a spiritual practitioner or a spiritual intuitive, or maybe it's your pastor, or maybe it's your a really good psychotherapist, someone who can really help you see it differently. A good grief counselor can help you do that. But if you suffer in silence, sometimes you have no perspective on it.
That's an excellent, excellent point. Even if it's a friend or a neighbor that can just let you talk and give you honest feedback about, I love you, but you've been in this poor me place for, 6 months now. And not that I'm rushing you, but, maybe you could look at that. Maybe I can help you identify what's keeping you stuck there. Because usually our friends can see us loud and clear and usually just choose to not ever say anything.
That's absolutely true. And it's especially true if you have children. If you're the adult, here again, we're not grieving in a vacuum. Our grief is affecting everyone around us, especially our children. They're looking to us for leadership. And when we feel like we're all in this little lifeboat and it's taking on water and we're all drowning, we're not really helpful. And to tough it out and say, I'm okay, you're not really. It's time to step up to the plate and ask for some help. And I actually discussed this in the section with employers. that if you have a person who has suffered a tremendous loss in their family, you might want to subsidize grief counseling. You will get a really good employee back a lot faster. Most people don't want to pay for it. And sometimes you do have to pay for it. You do have to step up to the plate and decide that it has value and it's worth spending time and effort on.
Hear, hear. So I don't mean to totally change the topic here, but I'm going to. And just to give you a heads up, we have about 9 minutes left, okay? But there has been this whole conversation in the chat room, which I'm really trying not to read, but they're just like going on and on and on, about demons. And I know in your book you do talk about ghosts, and actually I've just released a new book called Dark Angels, which talks about ghosts and attached entities and how to get rid of them. And so let's talk about ghosts, especially when it comes to the thought and the idea of loss and grieving and maybe, working with someone that's a medium. What are your thoughts about people coming back from, in the ethereal world to come visit?
Well, I moved on any number of ghosts myself, including my niece when she died. And what I would say is that, yes, a lot of times a person either doesn't understand they're dead or discovered that they have in fact died and they're completely confused. And when you're dead, you travel with the speed of thought. And so, bingo, you can literally ricochet among all your family members pretty quickly. And so people who say, well, I just had a sense that she was right here, that's exactly what happened. And in the book, I discuss this. It's not always easy to find a good medium. I mean, it just isn't. And so if you don't know of one, why not use the power of prayer, the power of positive thought, your connection to the divine, and ask God to help your loved one. Bring in angels. You can impose on your angels and ask them to come in and guide your loved one to the light, to the heaven world, to have help where they are in case they're lost. This is especially true of children. Sometimes children don't always know what is going to happen to them after they die, or they want to linger with their family. And a person who is a ghost is still earning karma in the state of being a ghost, and you really want them to move on. I've had many a person say, "Oh, I just love having a ghost around." Not such a good thing. It's not good for the ghost, and it's not good for you. They need to move on in process, and you need to move on with your life too.
So do you find that when someone passes that they tend to go around and visit family members? Has that been your experience? Or other people's experience that's been reported to you?
It's every variety you can imagine. Some people move on completely. Sometimes children are so worried about their parents that they can't leave. And so if their parents are stepping up to the plate and they are helping that child to leave, then a lot of times the child can he or she can move on very readily. Many people will say, my friend died and visited me, the night she died, but I never saw her again. A lot of times the soul sees the light, and they do move on pretty readily. Sometimes a person is very ready to go, and the light comes for them, and they move on. If a person is murdered, sometimes that's very hard because in an act of violence that causes a death can weigh very heavily on a soul. And all of the prayers of all of the family act like beams of light for that soul that helps them with that transition.
And so for people that have had someone pass and have had that feeling like, well, I felt like my mom sat on the end of my bed, or I thought I saw my dad standing in the doorway, or I felt like, my daughter was holding my hand. What do you have to say to those people? Are they crazy?
I don't think any of them are crazy. I think they're quite sane. Why we would assume someone who is normally going through life is all of a sudden instantaneously crazy, I don't understand, but I agree with you completely. They're not crazy. They actually had that experience. Actually, my Ariana's sister felt Ariana with her arm on her shoulder. I could see it, and I said, no, you have to go, and she could feel when her sister actually left. And sometimes if you're able to move a soul on, you can feel that they've left. You can feel the difference. And so,
you can definitely feel the difference.
Yes, you can definitely feel the difference. And so, and if people say, well, I really like having her around, I hear that a lot too. I would offer you that person, if you love that person as much as you think you do, ask angels to guide that soul to the correct realm in the heaven world. That is the greatest service you could possibly imagine, is to help that soul. Keeping that soul with you fosters attachment, and that's not good for either of you.
So let me ask you this question, because we might have a differing belief here, but do you think that people can go into the light and then come back and visit?
I believe that in the heaven world there are amazing counselors that guide a new soul in how to help those who are grieving them. So we're probably very much on the same page. So a soul can transition into the heaven world and still provide assistance or give the family the feeling that they're there, but they're okay. There's a difference in how they feel.
Okay. Yeah, I was just kind of checking on that part. I want to share a real quick story. So my sister had a daughter who passed, and they were having her cremated, and her daughter was handicapped. And my sister always dressed her in bling, shiny this, leopard, fur, because she was severely handicapped. And so when she passed, they were having her cremated. She wanted an urn. She went and looked at the urn. She goes, they're really boring. I said, you know what? Let me take care of it. I know what she wants. And so there I am walking through Hobby Lobby, which is like this big craft store that had these vase things, because her daughter was going, no, go to Hobby Lobby. And I'm walking through the store, and I'm not finding anything. So now she and I are having this conversation as I'm walking through garden supplies. I'm like, Rebecca, it's like you wanted me to come here to find your thing, so, find it and direct me to it so I can get this thing. And so, I had gone through the entire store. And so I'm walking out, and I'm like, nothing. I give up, head over to the register, and I find this container. I'll call it a container. That was like this shiny kind of leopard skin glass thing. It was really cool. And she was like, there it is. I'm like, okay. But she had gone into the light, and she was just like, this is how I want my decor.
Mm-hmm.
Well, it was pretty funny.
I had one where this man committed suicide, and I discovered that he had visited my house, which I don't ordinarily allow, but anyway, he was my neighbor, and he said, I didn't know you did this, and I said, you're not supposed to be here. He said, you have to move on. I'm going to be doing that. And he says, no, but you've got to go knock on my wife's door and tell her that there's some bad things in that house. And I said, this isn't the ghost whisperer. I don't do that. But you can do that. Once you get to the other side, you can visit her in the sleep state, and you can help guide her. And so he did, in fact, move on, and he did get guidance in the heaven world, and his wife left that house. She didn't even move her possessions out.
Wow.
And so he was able to get that guidance, and he was able to help her. So I absolutely believe that. I've seen it so many times.
Well,
it's a
and
really
she
wonderful
listened.
thought.
And she listened. Woohoo! For the listening.
Yes, she did listen.
Tina, we are like so out of time here. Any last quick words? Well, actually, where can people get your book? We need to go there
My book
already.
is available from the ARE Press at the Association of Research and Enlightenment website. It's available at Amazon and available at Barnes & Noble. And I have a blog and a website and a Facebook and a Twitter page.
Okay, and so what we have posted is thelightworkersguide.com. Do you have a different website other than that one?
No, that's my website.
Okay, www.thelightworkersguide.com. If you didn't write it down, it's on the Just Energy Radio webpage. And Tina, you are so cool.
Thank you. You are.
I loved having you on.
Thank you so much.
This hour went way too fast.
Yes, it did.
All right, Tina, thank you very much for coming on, and we'll have to have you come back. Okay?
Thank you so much. Bye-bye.
All right. Bye-bye. Okay, and next week, well, interesting that we were going to be talking about, is there life after death? So I guess we kind of got a little preview to that. And we're going to be having a return guest. We're going to have Jay Weeder. He is known for his work with 2012, but he is going to be talking about his new film, Infinity. And so until next week, I'm Dr. Rita Louise. This is Just Energy Radio. Thank you all for tuning into the show. Again, if you enjoyed the programming, please do mark it as a favorite. You can listen to the archives at www.justenergyradio.com. And until next week, be blessed.
Join host Dr. Rita Louise each week at this time for Just Energy Radio. Point your browser to www.justenergyradio.com for more show information and to contact Dr. Rita. Until next time, remember, it's all just energy.